Welcome back to the program YouTube. Today we have a new program lesson for you, and in this video you're going to find out how to look after your shoulders, especially if you're doing CrossFit. Now, there are various components to the shoulder that make up the whole complex, and just like most areas in the body, it's very unusual for something to work in isolation. So our classic shoulder joint is what's called a ball and socket joint. We have, in essence, a shallow socket and a ball, which is the head of the humerus, and they join together. We also see that in the hip joint, but the big difference with the shoulder is that it has a lot more movement. The socket that it goes into is a lot more shallow, and also we don't have as big musculature. Obviously on the hip we've got a very tight socket, and we have these huge muscles. We have our glutes, we have our quads, our hamstrings all around. Our shoulder just doesn't have the same muscle bulk. And that means there's lots of advantages to that. One of the big advantages, I can do all sorts of things with my shoulder. It's got a huge range of motion. My hips don't have that ability, and maybe some gymnasts can pop their leg above their head and stuff, but the majority of us just don't have that range of motion. And obviously this is super important for CrossFit, you know. I need to have a good overhead position for Olympic lifting, for doing my gymnastic work, for doing handstands, whatever it may be. And the shoulder, or good shoulder mobility, allows that to happen. However, with such range of motion, we also need to make sure that we look after the joint and bring some stability. And that's one of the main things we're going to look at today, because actually it's not just enough to have a super flexible shoulder. We also need it to be strong and able to support ranges of motion. So this set of exercises that we're going to be looking at is something that I tend to do every day. And the big thing you may notice is that a lot of the exercises are weighted. The reason for that is that external load helps to build the stability of the shoulder whilst helping to improve the range of motion. So for a lot of the shoulder work that I do, I actually use a kettlebell. You can see here we have a 20 kilo kettlebell. Usually, or I like to try and build up to doing this with 24, but you have to work your way there. If you're not used to using these loads, it's important you start out light and just build up. The reason I use a kettlebell is actually it's a bit harder doing these exercises with a dumbbell. You have a lot more instability. So obviously the two weights either side mean it rotates a bit more, but the kettlebell, because it fixes onto the forearm, it gives you that bit more stability. So the first exercise I'm going to be doing is actually an overhead lunge. And the reason I do this is just to get the shoulder kind of organized, fired up and moving. So I take the kettlebell, I take it into the overhead position. I want straight wrist, straight elbow, straight shoulder. And then I just begin. My overhead lunge. So as you can see, actually the shoulder's remaining static and having to stabilize, whereas the rest of my body's moving around it. And this is like a fairly easy position for the shoulder to be in. Everything's locked, everything's straight, and I'm just really working that stability through that motion. So the next exercise, we're also going to use the kettlebell again, and this is a modified version of a windmill. The one thing you'll notice is that a lot of CrossFit movements actually require this internal rotation of the shoulder. So even when you're doing push-ups, the shoulder will tend to internally rotate. When you're doing snatches or different lifts, the shoulder will tend to internally rotate. And also on the rings as well, that's where we get a large amount of this happening. And what this exercise allows me to do is, in like a safe and controlled way, load that internal rotation. So there's various forms of the windmill. We use this one. I quite like this this positioning of it for the variation we're going to do. So again, I take the kettlebell overhead, just straight all the way through, and this time I'm just going to rotate and come down, rotate, come down. So you can see the hips going into a lot of flexion, but one of the main things that happens is I get this internal rotation of my shoulder. If this is a bit challenging for people, I'm going to show something we call the arm bar, which has a similar effect, but it's slightly easier to manage a load in this way. So this is what we call the arm bar. So again, everything going straight into the shoulder. Now just like a Turkish get-up, except I'm going to roll over and come through. And what you can see is that my shoulder goes into a lot of internal rotation. And you can see a little bit of shaking here, where just those stabilizing muscles are starting to work. So for our first exercises, we're using that kettlebell as an external load. And actually now I'm going to be using my body weight. And these exercises, the next few exercises we're going to go through are a lot more, I suppose, like typical of what we'd see in CrossFit. And this next one's just hanging from the bar. So obviously in CrossFit we hang from the bar a lot, you know, pull-ups, toes to bar muscle-ups. We also hang from the rings in various ways. And so all I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the load off my body and I'm just going to form circles. So first circle, I just go rotate back and forward. And next circle, I rotate the other way. So a very simple exercise. But the one thing we're doing is kind of getting activation of the musculature around the shoulders in the position that we're going to be using. For this, you can build up quite a lot of reps. You can go like 20 reps one way, 20 reps the other way. And all of these movements you can be doing just before your training, yeah? So the final exercise we're going to be doing for the shoulder is we're going to be using a barbell. I've just got a technique barbell right now, which I think is around 10 kilos. It's obviously half the weight of a normal male barbell. And you can do these exercises with like fractional plates or various things. But considering you use the bar so much in CrossFit, it's useful to kind of just accumulate those reps. So what I'm going to be doing now, I'm going to just go into what we call our muscle snatch. But really the focus is just on the shoulder. I'm going to control both the up and the down. And you see as I go up, I really work that external rotation. And then as I go down, I'm doing the opposite. I'm really working the internal. Yeah? So there you have, we had 4 exercises today looking at what we can do for the shoulder, and all of them really use load but also started to work the mobility, and I think that's something that's crucial for the shoulder. When you're trying to increase the range of motion, you also want to increase stability in that position. Use the kettlebell, barbell and also the gymnastic bar. If you do have any specific questions, pop them in the comment below, like the video, share the video, and we'll see you soon.